but the government gave me that while I was over there.
All right, Dad, you can have a seat. Dad, you can sit down. We're gonna. Yeah, I should introduce myself. My name's Chuck Kelly, and I'm proud to say this is my dad. And we're going to have a nice conversation today about his military service. Hopefully, I'll let him do most of the talking, but I kind of helped him put together a presentation here. I hope you'll find it interesting. Um, I was amazed at how many original documents that Dad still had from his time in the service. So this pretty handsome guy, I think you probably agree. Um, Dad served in the U.S. Army from 1954 to 1956. Um, so, one thing I was amazed that he had is this document from 1951, which is his selective service card. That many of you probably remember. I know I had to fill a thing out when I turned 18, and he did that as well. So he ended up getting drafted to the Army. So I thought he could share about how he came to Burlington and then ended up in the service.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I came up here in '52 to work for Western Electric, and I worked for them until '54 when I was drafted by the Army. And after being drafted from Raleigh, went down to South Carolina and stayed there a few days, and then from there I was moved on down to uh, Fort Gordon in Augusta. But after getting down there, I started my basic training at Fort Gordon. Well, excuse me, Camp Gordon
Yeah.
at that time. It became Fort Gordon later on when I got back. But we did the basic training thing, which was no fun really, but I got through it okay that fall and winter. And then in the spring, they decided to put me in the Signal Corps and be a teletype repair person. That was pretty much fun, I guess you'd say. It was the longest school that I went to when I had it. And later on, after I finished that school, they assigned me to the Signal Corps.
Yeah.
We had a thing here from Southeastern Signal School that I was in, and
Yeah, this is a certificate that Dad got upon completion of his course there at Southeastern Signal School. And one thing I learned about, I guess, a little bit about Signal Corps, which Dad served with the Signal Corps throughout his service.
yep.
They were called the eyes and ears of the U.S. Army. I don't know if that was something they said to you guys there, but
I'm not hearing the best in the world today. One of my hearing aids went out. You might know it'd be something wrong. But
so here's a photo of his class there. You think you can pick Dad out of that lineup? Anybody see him up there? It might be a little small for you guys.
I'd like to introduce you to one or two of the people that are here. My nephew from Chapel Hill got to get here, and he's Jerry Cotton. Just over here on the front row next to my daughter, Debbie. And then my new grandson is there with his
grandson.
dad.
Great grandson, yeah.
So something to really be proud of to have another Kelly coming on.
So after, I don't know if you folks know what teletype is, sort of like a big typewriter that can be used to encode text for transmission via, I I guess, a hard line as well as a radio transmission. You said that I guess you made some good friends when you were there during this time. So where did you end up going after you completed that class?
Well, I was gonna say if y'all could pick me out, but
Yeah.
I got my head. So that's me in that class.
Yeah. Yeah, I'll back up just to note one thing was that this was while Dad was working at Western Electric. So when this is actually a little snippet from their probably, company newsletter that Dad was in service there at Camp Gordon with Southeastern Signal Corps. Yeah. So from there, can you tell us a little bit about what this place is? You remember that one? Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, what's that?
right.
No, Dad, tell us about your time in Massachusetts.
Yeah. After I finished that school, they put us on a plane and selected a few of us and sent us to Fort Devens, Massachusetts, to crypto school. Now, any of you that are familiar with crypto has to do with code. So I went to that school up there, and it wasn't too long, not as long as the teletype repair school was, but the schooling up there operated night and day. The people didn't get too much sleep, but thank goodness the class that I was in the daytime. And when I finished it, I finished at the top of my class. That's when I got orders, which was highly unusual, and I had no idea, to report to Kelly Air Force Base in San Antonio, Texas. The friend of mine that was also in that class up there, he had gotten his orders the day before to go to Germany. The next day after I'd got mine, they changed his orders to be on my orders and go to San Antonio also. Now, why they did this, I'll never really understand, except that it's supposed to be Joint Task Force that did this thing. And we decided to go to San Antonio together, and he lived down in Georgia. Me and my wife drove down to Georgia and got with him and his wife, and we drove out to San Antonio. Went in this brand new security center out there they call the
Palace.
And it was quite an elaborate thing. We were reported in there to this Air Force sergeant, and I asked him, I said, can you get us some quarters to live in? He said, what do you mean quarters? He said, you're going overseas in just a little while after you get some more training. I said, well, my orders just read further instruction. He said, yeah, you go get some further instruction and then you going overseas. So after going to that school, I finished in the top of that class, and they selected, out of this whole thing, was 12 Army people and 12 Air Force people. Why didn't they just take 24 Air Force people, since it was Air Force equipment that we were on? I'll never really understand, except that I guess they wanted some Army people, and I just happened to finish at Fort Devens to get on the orders to go out there. But it was quite odd. One day that I was in that security center, this Air Force officer came up to me and he tapped me on the shoulder. We were wearing fatigues, PFC. I was all the stripe we got. So he said, are you in the Army? I said, yeah. He said, what are you doing here? I said, I can't tell you that. So we went through that school, and afterwards,
Mm.
did you want to come in with anything?
Well, I was going to say you were saying that that guy said he figured out you knew what you were talking about, right?
Yeah.
That, yeah, you said I guess you got interim top secret clearance when you.
After we'd finished Fort Devens, that's when they put us on getting our top secret clearance through the government, and they said, I don't know how many people sent some of them down to Dunn to investigate where I'd lived and came from, and came up here to Western Electric, talked to all the people I'd worked with up there and everything on getting this clearance. But eventually, I did finally get it. It was something that took the whole time of the rest of the schooling, the
Time and
work that I did up there, which was quite odd. I'll tell you some things later on.
Yeah, I think he mentioned to me, I think towards the end of your time in the service is when you got your final clearance, right? But
Yeah.
this is the actual, I think, base housing where Dad and Mom stayed during their time in San Antonio. I guess the official name was Air Force Communications Security Center. So Dad was there, I guess, getting training on using the Air Force communications, radio communications equipment.
I asked the Air Force sergeant, I said, can you give us a place to stay? He said, what you mean a place to stay? He said, you're going on overseas in just a little bit. I said, what? He said, yeah. I said, well, my orders read to report out there for further instruction. He said, yeah, you're going to get some further instruction, and then you're going overseas. So,
here's your further instructions right here. Dad had still the copy that he received back in September of 1955.
With Joint Task Force 7, and it was just 12 Army people and 12 Air Force people. And like I say, here we are. We had to learn that Air Force equipment and take care of it.
So tell us, I guess, so just, Army, Navy, Air Force, Joint Task Force. And I kind of figured out this AEC at the bottom is for the Atomic Energy Commission. I asked Dad, I think at the time, I said, did you know what they were going to be doing when you got told you were going over there? And he said, no. I guess he kind of quickly learned that later. But so let's take a look at where he ended up going. A place called Eniwetok Atoll in the South Pacific, which is part of the Marshall Islands, right?
Yeah. When I finished the school at San Antonio, they put us on a plane and flew us to California, San Francisco, and at Fort
Travis Air Force
Base. We stayed there just a few days and saw a little bit of San Francisco, and then they put us on a plane and sent us on over to Hawaii. That was Fort Camp.
You said Hickam Field.
Hickam.
You stayed overnight in Schofield Barracks, I think. There.
We got there, and I spent one night in Hawaii. They put us in the
Schofield
Barracks. Any of you that are familiar with hearing about it before, the Russians, not the Russians, the Japanese strafed it. There's pock marks all on the side of it and everything because it was cement of where they shot it up and everything. But I spent one night in the Schofield Barracks. The next day, we got on a plane and
to Kwajalein, right?
To Kwajalein. If any of you are familiar with Kwajalein, it's a jumping off place between Hawaii and Japan. Let's see, I think we spent maybe one night in Kwajalein or something. Anyway, from Kwajalein, they put us on another airplane for a short hop from your map going from Kwajalein to Eniwetok, which was just a few hundred miles. And
Yeah, let me interject that the handout, one of the handouts, the information about Eniwetok Atoll, and that's a coral atoll that's here in the South Pacific. This one map, you can see it. It's sort of up to the further west from Kwajalein in the red, but it's a series of little islands. I'll show some other photos in a minute. You mentioned to me about an interesting experience on your flight from Honolulu to Kwajalein.
flight over there, about halfway out, I guess, we were in this slick silver triple-tailed airplane. Back then, it was still motors. We had 4 motors on it. And about halfway there, one of those motors started acting up, and the pilot cut it off. I didn't really get scared or anything. I thought, well, 3 can fly as well as 4, so we flew on that way on 3 for a while, and after a while, he fired that thing back up and tried to, like, sling it off the wing almost. Anyway, he got it calmed down and smoothed that thing down, and we flew on the 4 engines from there on to Kwajalein. After I got to Kwajalein, they put us on a short hop from there over to Eniwetok, because that was going to be the control station for this entire operation. All the information come through Eniwetok and was funneled from there back to Hawaii, and from Hawaii back to Los Alamos. But
Yeah. You said you thought you were going to be in Kwajalein, but because you spent some time getting things set up, right? You were one of the first people there.
But anyway, me and the 1 or 2 others that went over to Eniwetok, we got the equipment operating and everything, which was the Air Force equipment. The communication center was a small room in this larger building that we were in. In the back room of this particular building was the Army cryptoists. They coded all the information and everything that come out of there, and then it came up to us in the front little room, and we put it on the Air Force equipment and fired it off to Hawaii. So really, you could say the information got funneled through, got coded 2 different times. First by the Army operations, and then giving it to us to put through the Air Force equipment. It was just a small, upright piece of equipment that we used. Let's see, I guess when we were doing that, let's see, I guess that might have been after the bomb was dropped, I guess.
Oh, okay.
Anyway, we stayed there, and that became our home for what time I was gone over there. And after
Yeah, I'm not sure what part you were going to talk about. I was going to, I guess you mentioned that this is sort of some actual photos of what your quarters look like. And you said in that the earlier picture with the islands, this is like modern pictures, basically just an airstrip fits on there, but the Air Force base part's in the southern part, and Dad's up there at the skinny part of the end of the island.
You talk about a small base. Now that was a small one. We lived down at the northern end of the narrow part of it, and I used to tell people it was so narrow you could spit from one side to the other of it. But they had the Air Force.
Tell us what it was like living there. Sort of describe the conditions.
Well, the conditions with myself and the 24 Army guys, we were we were set up to be TDY. I'm sure there's some people here probably know what TDY is. I know Pat does, but
Yeah, explain that for us.
TDY is that you're temporarily attached to another outfit. So they put us in there of being attached to some more Air Force people. But the time we were there, they told us that there was going to be a H-bomb dropped from an airplane, first one ever.
Before you,
well,
let me stop you before you talk about that. Before you talk about the H-bomb, let's mention about these photos that you're not in.
Yeah.
That you said you didn't have to be in that photo because
us being TDY, we didn't have to stand any formations, no details, no nothing. We just had our own little thing to do to ourselves, and which made it nice.
and then you got to spend your free time doing other things, right?
Yeah. The
Yeah.
theater there,
Yeah, turn back this way.
I'd go to it at night, whether it was raining or not. You just put on an old raincoat and you'd sit there and watch them show some of the sorriest movies you've ever seen in your life. But I'd go just to pass the time away.
You said one night there was something happened, right? One night you were out there at the movies and
sitting in that theater one night, and it was storming and everything and raining, and all of a sudden up at the other end of the island was this explosion went up, and I thought, well, what in the world's happened? I knew there was a tanker out there that was unloading some fuel, and I thought that tanker had gone up, but I found out the next day the mail plane was coming in, and he come in a little bit short and sheared the landing gear off of the airplane, and he skidded down the runway. Thank goodness they saved the mail and everything. Nobody got hurt particularly or anything. So that's what's happened on that part when it was sitting out there that night.
yeah, that's the actual place. I guess these are photos from a brochure that they gave Dad while he was there. He could send home because they were very. He wasn't allowed to have a camera and take any of his own photos, but they gave them some of these were stock photos that they gave. So like these, you'll see they were each stamped on the back with this. This is an official photograph and not to be published without prior approval of competent authority.
Being over there, being TDY, you could have no cameras, no binoculars, no nothing like that. Everything was top secret as far as we were concerned of what was going on over there on the island. And
so these are pictures from a party that you were at.
A small USO troop came in over there at Christmas. Otherwise, that was the only civilian people that I saw while I was over there. It was interesting to say the least, I guess, of what all we done, but
yeah, so the main attraction, so tell them a little bit about, well, I'll interject here so he gave you a handout of this certificate that Dad received.
Handout that you got, which is
Operation Red Wing.
And it's a combination of all your military, Air Force, Navy, and so forth and so on. So
yeah, I'll mention that so that it was Joint Task Force 7 was in support of atomic testing in the South Pacific, and it started a few years before this. There were several operations. Operation Red Wing was for test in the year 1956 from May to July while Dad was there. So there were like 17 nuclear tests done. Dad I would think witnessed all but 4 of those. So we're gonna talk about those in detail. I managed to pull an image from the internet. You know, you can find anything you want on the internet, pretty much. A map of so Eniwetok is down at the bottom, and then these are other islands in the atolls where they did some atomic tests there close by. The stronger tests were in the Bikini Atoll, which probably a lot of you have heard about. That's like almost 200 miles east of here.
Yeah.
But I thought you had mentioned to me that it wasn't like you guys were talking about nuclear tests while you were there, you know.
A lot of these tests that are pointed out there, I didn't even know anything about them. Nobody didn't bother to tell you anything over there, really. You had to just see for yourself as to what was going on.
Now, what kind of safety precautions did they take for to protect you from?
Yeah, they told us that we were going to witness the only H-bomb to ever be dropped from an American plane. And 2 different times they had scheduled a thing to do it, and they had bad weather, and they had to call it off. But the B-52 would fly from Hawaii over to Eniwetok, and the bomb was already there on our island waiting to be taken to be dropped. And let's see, we got a picture.
We got some pictures. What I was going to ask you to describe first was the other nuclear test experience you remember witnessing, the one that was closer to Eniwetok.
The one that was
not the plane drop, but so this is a video of the first atomic test on Eniwetok.
that was after the bomb had been dropped that we had.
But I was going to ask you to describe the one that you witnessed, not the airplane drop, the other bomb. Talk about that one.
Yeah, after they dropped from the airplane, we were funneled out there on the edge of the island one morning, and they told us, they said, this one will be the strongest one that you will feel while you're out here. And we lined up out there. We couldn't turn and look right straight at it with one going off. You'd face away from it, and as soon as the initial flash went up, you could turn around and look at all that colored mushroom and everything go up in the sky. It was interesting. Anyway, they told us, they said, this will be the strongest one that you'll witness while you're out here. And standing out there, I'll remember we felt heat from that one that morning as it come and rolled into us. But everybody had a badge.
Radiation badge?
Radiation badge. You had to wear it all the time. They never told us how much radiation we might have got. I don't never really know. But you just had to wear the badge. You know the government, they're not going to tell you no more than what they have to.
So this is a crater on the right from one of the atomic tests while Dad was there, the first one. And that crater, they say, is about 600 feet in diameter. The concrete dome on the left, we'll talk a little bit about that later. That's actually another crater from a test that was done later.
Yeah, we didn't ever know anything about any of this stuff. Chuck dug this out of the computer and got that in.
Yeah, a couple of photos of another atomic test while Dad was there, and then this is a photo of people watching one of the explosions. I assume they either have some protection or they, it looks like they're holding their hands up like they'd be using binoculars. But this Japtan Island is like the third island up from Eniwetok. But the main event we want to talk about, and Dad's alluded to, is the only hydrogen bomb drop from an aircraft.
Yeah, this newspaper caption here, my wife cut it out of the newspaper, was the only information that we got on that stuff. Was just what they wanted to report to the people.
And I guess you weren't in communication with her. I mean, it wasn't until you got home that, he knew that
Yeah, the only
she knew he
only
was out
thing
there
we
with
could
that.
do was just write mail back and forth to each other, no other communication or anything. Uh, but
Yeah, so this bomb was dropped near Bikini
yeah,
Atoll, which is about 200 miles from where Dad was.
if a lot of you have probably heard of Bikini before, that's where they'd been having the test out there. Every 2 years, they had the atomic test at Bikini.
So why don't you describe the event that you experienced there? Tell them about witnessing this test.
They lined us up out there this morning, particular morning, and it was pitch black dark. You were standing out there on the edge of the island, and they knew the weather was clear and everything, so we knew, boy, it's going to go today. The B-52 left our island with the bomb going to Bikini, which is about 190 miles up from us. He went up there, and during that time we were standing out there in the darkness, the countdown started finally from the airplane. This is 19, 18, 17, 16, 15, 14, 13, 12, 11, 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and boom. This world lit up brighter than any sun you have ever seen. And that was us being 190 miles from it. All we saw was just the blast of it going off. We found out later through our equipment that it came through, that they missed the target by about 4 miles. They had made a mistake of what they were doing, but they said it didn't hurt anything of the tests that they were doing and what they did from that. But we stood out there, and after the glow sort of died down and it sort of darkened back up again, we went on back down to the communication center. And about the time we got down there, and the fact it was about, the best I can remember, something like about 15 minutes later, the sound wave came across our island, and it just rumbled and re-rumbled like thunder. It was interesting to say the least, but we went back in the communication center, and in the community, it was a small armored room that we worked in from the rest of the people, what they did on the outside. And inside, there was 2 little rooms in there. In the back room was the Army crypto people that coded the messages and everything to go out. They passed it out to us in the little front room where the Air Force equipment was, and we put that information in on our equipment and sent it out to Hawaii. But I guess you'd say it sounded like to me they just about double coded what they were doing there, since the Army first put it in code and then gave it to us, and then we put it on the Air Force equipment, which coded it again. And from there to Hawaii, and from Hawaii back to Los Alamos.
Yeah. We included one photo here. This may not have been the actual bomb that was dropped, but it was this kind of bomb that was the one dropped from the aircraft. I had some numbers written down. It weighed approximately 7,600 pounds. It's about 12 feet long, diameter of 3 feet. So, so then the last slide we had here was these are actually 2 letters of appreciation that Dad received at the end of his service time from the Signal Corps, and basically speaks of your individual efforts materially contributed to the success of your task group and task force online radio teletype network. Your technical skill in overcoming difficult installation and maintenance problems, fine devotion to duty, and ability to work in harmony with different services and civilian agencies reflects credit upon yourself and the Signal Corps. The other one says, your commendable action exemplifies your high standard of conduct and competence and reflects great credit on you and the U.S. Army Signal Corps. Yeah. So.
Some of you probably never heard tell of this. It's the oddest thing I ever seen while I was in the service. But after the bomb was dropped, sometime after that, the Air Force sergeant came and called us 12 Army guys together, and he said, since you people have operated this equipment so good, we're going to change you to just having one person per shift. Every other day, you won't have nothing to do but swim, lie in the sun, feed, whatever. And since we didn't have to stand any formations or nothing like that, that was great. I don't know if you've ever heard of a change like that, Pat. That Air Force sergeant gave us every other day for the rest of the time we were over there that we didn't have to do nothing as far as military.
Yeah, this concludes the main part of our presentation, and we wanted to allow some time for questions because I'm sure there'll probably be some interesting ones, but Max is going to come around with a mic so people can hear. And we do have a few more slides that we'll share, but we thought we wanted to give time for questions first.
Yes, thank you. Frank, since this was all top secret, does that mean you have to kill everybody in this room right now?
Yeah.
I didn't scan in one document. He had a declassification debrief, and there's a form and all this stuff that I thought was quite interesting. He still had that as well.
Frank, when you witnessed the explosion, did you feel the shock wave?
Not really, no.
Anybody else? Yeah.
We had one part we want to talk to you about. I don't know how many of you are familiar with the plane a few years ago that accidentally dropped 2 H-bombs here in North Carolina.
I'll go ahead and share about that in case there's some questions about that.
In the newspaper, it was reported.
So this is a real thing. This happened in 1961. This is courtesy of Our State Magazine. I took some of their images from offline. They published this article in May of 2020. There was, at the time, this B-52 was carrying 2 atomic bombs, and they were trying to refuel, and they had a leak or something. Anyway, what happened is the plane started coming apart. They lost a wing, and so the crew had to bail out, and the plane went down. This was near Seymour Johnson Air Force Base, near Goldsboro. So as the plane went down, 2 bombs came out. One, the parachute deployed, and it ended up hanging up in a tree. Yeah. And the other one, the parachute didn't deploy, and it went into the ground, the muddy ground there in that part. I guess it wasn't frozen that hard that time of year.
It went down in that swamp, and it's still in that swamp. The
Yeah.
government decided it was too deep for them to get it out, so they left it there.
They recovered part of it.
Said it would never hurt anything since it wasn't on.
So
We hope it don't.
this circle of trees is in the middle of a field there. And the circle of trees, they have an easement. There's no digging is allowed there. But this is a photo of where they said debris may have been as deep as 180 feet. I think they did some ultrasound stuff. The bombs themselves did partially arm. I think the one that went down, that floated down by parachute, is sort of a sequence that starts, and there's a number of events that have to occur, and like all but one fail-safe was passed. So it was really probably closest to a nuclear disaster of this type in the United States. But I asked Dad if he remembered it back in
If
1961.
that thing had gone off, there wouldn't be no North Carolina right now.
Yeah. But yeah. The other thing I did want to mention, the photo we had earlier of this concrete dome. This is called the Runit Island Dome. Runit Island is up in the Eniwetok Atoll, and it was,
Never know anything about that. They didn't bother to ever tell us
Well, this-
common people.
yeah, this didn't happen till, so I guess I showed you that map where the tests that Dad witnessed. There were some 67 tests over the years done on Eniwetok Atoll primarily in the 1950s. In the 70s, they went out and they collected a lot of the radioactive waste and stuff, and they dumped it in this crater and they put concrete over the top of it. Unfortunately, it's a place where, I mean, it's a place no one's supposed to go, but they've allowed people to go back to Eniwetok and they will venture over there, but there's nothing that sort of prohibits them from doing that. Recently, I think 2020, there was a report to Congress on the state of this dome, because as you can see, it's pretty close to the water. There's concern whether there's leaking. Of course, they've reported that it's not a problem at this time, but there have been certainly effects on the people there. This dome is about 374 feet in diameter, about 24 feet tall, and contains over 100,000 cubic yards of radioactive waste. And if any of you are familiar with radiation and sort of uranium and all that stuff, the half-life of those things is years, so it takes a long time for this to degrade. But that's one of the after-facts of what's there. Yeah, now a couple other questions. Yeah, Betsy.
I have two.
Mm.
One is, I didn't understand the radiation badge. Is that supposed to protect you in some way?
No, I think it
No.
just measures how much radiation dosage you would
We
be
don't never
getting.
know how much
Ah.
radiation we might have got.
Of course, if it's anywhere on the island, it's probably the same as, each individual having it. But he told me
Some-
that they couldn't
sometime
go into the
after
mess
that-
hall if they weren't wearing it. So that's how they got compliance.
Sometime after that, I had a colonoscopy and had that radiation effect on me. And I don't know if it had anything to do with this or not. You just don't know. Back in 52, when they started tests out
Mhm,
there,
mhm.
was 56, wasn't it?
Well, they did. I mean, for your time there, yeah.
Anyway, after the Second World War, they started having tests out there every 2 years at Bikini. So that place became quite active
Mm.
radiation-wise up there. And we don't know how bad it was down at Eniwetok, but
Yeah. I didn't mention the strength of the weapons was much greater in Bikini. It was 1954 that one of the strongest atomic tests ever was done, and that there was severe fallout from that, and I think a lot of people were affected. It was a test that they had that the bomb was like, I don't have the yield written down, but it was nearly 10 times stronger than they expected it to be.
the 2 years prior to the test that I was involved in, they exploded the first H-bomb on a tower on an island up there at Bikini, and it blew the whole little island away.
Try that one.
I've heard that some people even got hurt some from that. I don't know.
Were any of those islands inhabited? Were there people anywhere, or they all just empty?
I think I know that Dad actually had a document from his time. There's a cordoned off area around the whole in the Marshall Islands that's like where they were doing that testing. At the time of the Bikini, this Castle Bravo was the really strong test that was mentioned. the people that were downwind of, I think, where the fallout went, it was like they projected it to go north and it went east, and there were people adversely affected there. You know, if you want to search on the internet, you can, you know, there's been document, even, you know, they let people go back to Eniwetok, and that's, you know, there's stories about that and the effect there. So, mm, right,
Frank,
yep.
where was Evelyn when you were stationed at Eniwetok?
She asked, where was mom when you were stationed in Eniwetok?
Was who?
Where was mom at?
She was at home at Fayetteville. After we drove all the way out to San Antonio and got out there and found out that I was going to be moving on to go overseas, she called her brother back in Fayetteville, and he and his wife caught a flight out to San Antonio and got the car and drove her back to Fayetteville. Anyway, she was pregnant at the time, so she had to start and report out to the Air Force, the Army hospital at Fort Bragg. And our daughter here, she was born at that hospital out at Fort Bragg.
Yes, she was born in January of '56, before Dad even actually witnessed some of the atomic tests. So,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh,
another question, then.
yeah, our daughter was 6 months old before I ever saw her.
Frank, who collected the toxic waste that was put under the concrete dome? Who collected the toxic waste
Yeah.
that was put under the dome?
So that was U.S. Army. So that
That wasn't a job you would want then, is it?
actually, I didn't do extensive research, but there, you know, certainly people that were doing that work didn't know what they were doing, and some of them, unfortunately, have, you know, developed cancers, and there's probably been some compensation, but, you know, you can't put a price on health. An unfortunate thing for sure. Any other questions?
Y'all ask us anything you can think of. We might not be able to answer, but we'll try.
Well, I'd just like to say, to really thank all of you for coming out, and really appreciate, you know, I supported my dad and that, and so I hope it was interesting for you guys. But, yeah.
I was glad that Chuck decided to help me with this stuff, and he dug up a whole lot of this stuff off of the computer that I never knew anything about.
Yeah, we do have, we brought some of the documents down. If you're interested in seeing, Dad could show you some of the stuff. We scanned in a few of those. They didn't look like just stuff typewritten, but we actually had the actual physical papers. I was pretty impressed by that. But yeah, thank you for coming out.
Thank y'all for coming.
Yeah, Dad worked for Western Electric on the communications equipment. It was, yeah, for here, yeah. Yeah.
Oh, thank you.
Oh, great.
Yeah,
You did a great job.
Let me turn you off here, young man.
Yeah.